Next, let's try logging in. We'll log in as this time potato head, password. Then we'll try and edit this one. And it works. And we should be able to update this just fine. So we can try that out. Let's get rid of the exclamation points. Submit. And it updates. There's no punctuation at the end of Granite Mind. Okay. So we'll just apply it to update. We don't want someone to be able to update something as well. So it's not just about seeing the form, but it's about actually doing the updating. We want to protect both of those. And deleting. Right now anyone can delete, but as soon as I restart the server and I try refreshing, currently I'm not logged in. If I click delete, it takes me back here. As soon as I log in, and remember that's happening because of the res.redirect back. So then we'll do potato head again, whoops, password, log in. Now if I try and delete this one, it works just fine. And now we've lost another precious campground and we're almost out of them to play with. So that's our middleware. We have it set up correctly now. We have check campground ownership, which checks is the user logged in at all. If they're not, then just redirect to back, and eventually we'll have a different error message. So it will say something like, you must be logged in first, and then if they are logged in, but they don't own the campground, then we'll have a different message that says, you don't have permission to do that, or that's not yours to delete, something like that. And then the important line is the next right here. So if the campground author.id dot equals, we can't do triple equals or double equals, we have to do dot equals because the fact that this is a string and this is an object ID, a mongoose object. So it's not comparable to a string unless you use the built-in equals method that comes with mongoose. Then we move on to next, which is whatever code we have inside of the route handler. So we run this. If it works, we run this, which is next. Or in this case, we run this, which is next. And in the case of update, we run this. Okay, so we'll save. We have one last thing that would be nice to do, which would be to hide these buttons. If I'm not logged in, I shouldn't be able to see an edit and delete button. Pretty much no website out there that has this kind of authorization would ever show you that button. It's just a bad user experience if you think you can delete something but you can't. So we want to hide it. And all we need to do is go to our template. So that's the show template. And inside of here we need to find those two buttons. They're right here. And we add an if statement. And I'm just going to write an empty statement to start with our correct brackets, just like that, and we'll indent just to make it easier to read. And all we want to do is check if the logged in user owns the current campground on the show page. And that's simple to do. We can just add the exact same code that we saw right here in our middleware, except it needs to be slightly different, but the same idea. If I paste this in, we can follow that. Rather than found campground, in the template we called it campground.author.id equals, and we actually don't have access to request.user.id. But remember, we do have current user that we set up. And if you don't remember when or where we set that up, I'll show you briefly. It's inside of our app.js. If we go down to that, and you take a look right here, res.locals.currentUser is request.user. And that's added to every single template. Every route will have current user available in the template equal to the currently logged in user. So current user ._ID. Let's give it a shot now. Make sure we add in the rest of our if statement parentheses. And if we refresh, you see that we have a problem. And what happens is that we don't have a current user right now. So because there's no one signed in, current user ._ID is problematic. So there's a simple way to check that. We want to check first, is there a current user? If there is, then let's check if that user owns this. So to prevent the error, all we need to do is if current user and campground author.id equals the current user's ID. Remember that if this is false, so if current user is undefined, if it's empty, if it's something that is falsy, we never move on to the rest of this, because the way that an AND statement works is that it requires both sides to be true. So it short circuits if this is false, and we never evaluate this. But if current user is anything, any user object, anything that's not falsy, whether it's the right user or not, this will be true. And then this is going to check if the user actually owns the campground. So if we try that again, refresh, right now we don't see the buttons, but if I do log in as Potato Head, go to more info, I do see those buttons. And just to double check everything still works, let's call it Sunset Lake Submit, and everything still works just fine. Great, so let's recap some of what we did here. Most importantly, in this last lesson, we focused on authorization, which is different than authentication. Authentication is just logging in, checking to see if you are who you say you are, while authorization is different permissions or security clearances, whatever you want to think of it as. It's what a user who is logged in is able to do, what they're allowed to do. So in our case, we went from having anyone at all being able to delete and update any campground, but now only users who own a campground can delete and update. And also, the last thing we did was hide the buttons, depending on if you're logged in or not. And we protected 3 different routes. That was edit, which is up here, update, right here, and delete, or destroy. And that was using our check campground ownership middleware that we defined. For now, it's just at the very bottom of this file. Awesome. In the next lesson, we'll focus on doing similar stuff for comments so that you can update a comment and delete a comment. And then we'll focus on authorization again, making sure that only people who own a comment can update it or delete it.